Welcome to the Mother Daughter-ish podcast. It's your mama's favorite podcast.
And the podcast your daughter always wanted.
This is Miss Dawn.
And Angelique.
From the 713. Houston, y'all. Get connected and stay connected weekly as new shows debut on Sunday, Wednesday, and please check out our Saturday Out and About showcases.
Enjoy the show. Please subscribe, like, share, comment, and tell every woman on the planet that you know about our show.
Here's our show for today. Hey, mothers and daughters, I have another fantastic individual to introduce you today. And guess what? We're going to learn so many things just as we have been for this entire series. But it's been really, really exciting to get to know people. And I am excited to introduce these individuals to you as well. Today, we have Miss Danielle. Thank you for joining me today.
Hi, Dawn. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to be able to talk with you because it's just been such a delight to get to know people. And sometimes you can get a little scared to get to know people because you think maybe it's not going to work out, but we all have something to share and something to give. So I'm excited about that. Let's introduce yourself. Tell us where you moved from in the U.S. and where you are now.
Hi, Dawn. Sure. Yeah. So my name is Danielle Pearson. I'm a bit of a military brat. So I was born on Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota. I call Chicago home. But moved a lot from there as well. And now I live in just outside of Melbourne, Australia. I've moved across Australia as well. So moving is a key theme with me, Dawn.
Now, had you been to Australia before you moved there?
No, it was one of those existential choices that I was working for Deloitte and I was traveling internationally across Europe and a bit of the Middle East. And I kind of said one day, I want to move to another country.
Right.
And it was coming out of the Great Recession. And unfortunately, Europe was not really an open place at that time, and Australia was. And so I kind of gave up everything I owned and moved to Australia sight unseen.
Well, I tell you, you don't have a South Dakota accent, but you do have an Australian one.
Oh, I do. Oh, gosh. Well, I've been here.
That's why I asked you that question because I'm like, well, she must have spent some time over there because she has, an Australian, accent. So that's pretty cool. So tell me about life in Australia. Let's talk about community. How are you building that community for yourself while you're there?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So community is a really big thing in Australia. You don't often think about, you kind of associate, well, Americans associate convicts, kangaroos, that kind of dangerous wildlife with Australia. You don't often think of Australia as kind of this high community place, and yet it's a very community-driven environment. How am I driving community or how have I gotten involved? Just finding those things that I really enjoy and love. So Australia is all about beach culture and really work-life balance. And so finding those little pockets of things that I enjoy and kind of embedding myself with people that are like-minded.
You know what? You just said something that brought back, it unlocked another fear because, I think I watched too much social media because my fear of going to Australia has always, not just the big muscle kangaroos that they show us, but there's this spider thing that everybody talks about. When I tell you the thought of that freaks me out, and the snakes. Those are the two things that people always make you feel like as soon as you get off the airplane, you're going to be covered in spider webs and snakes are going to crawl up your pants. Where did we get this craziness from? I'm telling you, that literally lives rent free in my brain.
Yeah,
This is
well,
why in 2025 I have not been to Australia yet.
yeah, well, that should probably be paying rent in your head if it's living there. No, look, it depends on where you are in Australia, to be honest with you. A lot of what gets put out into social media is really what happens in the Northern Territory, which is very different. Australia geographically is a massive country, right? It's about the size of America geographically. No, in fact, you very rarely see any of those. Snakes don't want to interact with you. So if you run into a snake, it's because you're kind of going off the grid and walking through its territory. So that's number one. You don't, in fact, I've never seen a snake and I've lived here 14 years.
Okay.
Spiders, look, the spiders are around. There's a particular class called the huntsman,
Yes.
and they're harmless, but they are very large. And every Aussie has one in their house somewhere. However, to put it into perspective, of 14 years, I've only seen three in that 14 years. So it's not, and they're not going to hurt you. And the poisonous stuff doesn't want to actually interact with you. So no, if you go to Sydney, which I highly recommend going, I lived there for 9 years. It's beautiful. Or you come down to Melbourne, you go up to Brisbane, or wherever it is you decide. I promise you, you will not be greeted by spiders and snakes. I promise you.
Okay, good, because I'm telling you, again, like you said, it probably should be paying rent. Is there anything in specific that you started doing to build community? Because I know I've talked to people and they say, well, they do meetups with other expats, or they create their own groups, or they have like a relocation service that they offer. Anything specific that you do that's consistent?
So I'll go a little bit deep because I want to answer that question honestly. One of the reasons I moved to Australia was I spent about 10 years in the US intelligence community, and coming out of that, I needed time to heal. And so I actually dealt with mental health issues, so PTSD and those types of things coming out of it. So for a good portion of my time in Australia, I hate to say this, but it's really been about focusing on me and healing.
Right.
Recently, I've started getting out in the community because I have this message and this book that I'm working on critical thinking. And so recently I've started getting out into the community, whether that's a Toastmasters to go speak in an environment, or that's, getting on a local network, or if that's just speaking at a meetup. I've started kind of talking about the value of critical thinking and also my time in intelligence. But that's just recently over the last year and a half. Most of my time has been spent kind of just chilling out and healing.
That's good. You know what? That's very important, because if you can't work on you, then how are you going to interact with other people? I believe in that. I remember when my kids were little and people used to say, "Oh, I know your kids," because I have four. They say, "Oh, I know the kids run the house." And I go, "No. I run my house. Are you kidding? What do you mean kids run my house?" I'm like, "No, I'm in control, because if mom's not happy, the house is not happy. What are you talking about?" Like,
Yeah.
no, 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 no. We have to work on ourselves, so then we can do those nurturing and those caring and loving things that we want to do by interacting with other people. So your family is all in, I won't say all, I'll say most of your family is still in South Dakota.
No, so my dad was in the Air Force. We just happened to be on that Air Force base when I was born. My
Okay.
family is predominantly in Chicago and in California. So I get out there as frequently as I can.
Okay.
It is a very long flight. I used to go out a couple times a year, but
That's like,
post-COVID,
how long?
oh gosh, I just did it not too long ago. It took about 23 hours to get to Chicago from Melbourne. So
Yeah, yeah,
bit of a
yeah.
ways. But, if you're on that healing journey, this is one thing when you do move to another country, it pulls you out of your environment. And
Yes.
it does actually, I have found it expedites that journey, that self-awareness journey.
That's right. Does your family get an opportunity to come over to Australia to see you?
Not all that often. Look, my family is working class. It's very expensive, and there's a lot going on in America, so it's a little bit difficult, and it's easier for me to make the trek.
Very true, very true. Now, I'm just going to ask you this in a generalization. I'm not going to ask you to speak for the entire country, but just from observation of what you've seen, how welcoming are Australians to Americans?
Oh, yeah. Look, in general
Right,
terms,
right.
very. I think they recognize, and I think this is something, yeah, look, I've had moments. I've definitely had moments with people, but very rare. I would say it's probably 10% of the time, 90% of the time. Australians, and I find people in general, and Dawn, you're well traveled. It's about the human to human interaction. It's not about your country of origin, your accent, what you look like, your orientation. It's about who you are. And if you approach people like that, people in general will be receptive back.
Exactly. Kind of like the energy you take is the energy you receive. If you go excited and hopeful, you're going to meet people that are just as excited to see you. You're right about that. You're right
Yeah.
about that. So we talked about community, we talked about family. Let's talk about personal. When you went to Australia, were you married? Did you get married while you were there? Are you still on the dating track? Are there no men available? Are there plenty of men available and you have to stay in the house because they're beating down the door? I'm hoping you say the latter one, or that you're married, because I would love to have my door beat down.
Oh, look, it's probably somewhere in the middle. So, no, I was in a relationship when I moved to Australia. Actually, that was kind of one of the reasons I moved to Australia in its own right, but that was that.
Okay.
No, I'm not married. Are there lots and plenty of men in Australia? Y yes, there are. There are men in Australia that, perfectly dateable men. The one thing is that dating has a cultural element to it. So
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you, I love American men. I
Okay.
think they're playful. I think they're fun. Every time I'm back, I'm like, why do I not live here again? Because I absolutely adore and love American men.
Yes.
Australians are very different. They don't chase. Women still are a little bit second class citizens, so there is kind of this cultural element of, well, men are in charge and women are effectively, you can work and do all those things, but dinner must be on the table and that kind of. So there's a little bit of, particularly as an American woman in that environment, it can be a little bit challenging at times to date. They are good looking. I'll give them that, but it's been probably more me going, I'm not quite sure if that's so much me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because I always think that, well, if I go to Australia, maybe I'll find like 15 Hugh Jackmans or something. He's good
Well, it
looking.
depends where you are in Australia. I tell you what, if you come to Australia, you've got to go to Sydney, go to Bondi, go out to the eastern beaches,
Yeah,
the
get
eastern
down.
suburbs. Yeah, and I tell you what, Oprah always talks about icebergs, which is this really beautiful ocean-filled pool that sits right on these rocks in Bondi Beach.
Okay.
You will run into numerous Hugh Jackmans, in potentially Hugh Jackman because he has a place out that way.
Oh,
So
so
give it a go. Give it a
that's
go.
so dating life is pretty good. Now, you said that you like American men. Are there a group of American men that you've seen there, like, or mostly not?
Not really. Not really. And I'm ex-military, so when I was living in DC for a period of time and absolutely loved because I got all host of, Secret Service and all different types of guys, and I loved that kind of guy. You don't really find that so much here in Australia, and the pockets of Americans you do find are typically here for a short period of time and they go back.
They go back.
And a lot of times people will come over married. I was doing kind of the opposite, which was getting out of a relationship.
Yeah. Well, okay. I was just wondering because I talk to women all over the world, and the two things that they're concerned about, and the next one we're going to talk about, but the two things they're concerned about is how will my dating life be? Will I be able to find a husband? Will I have a relationship? The second thing is, what in the world am I going to do for work if I don't already have a job? Because I'm trying to get away from a job and I get to another place and I have to find a job. They may not want to hire me because I'm not local. If I find a job online, it's going to take me time to build it, and that move may now take me 2 years. I hear this from women all the time. So it's the dating and finding a husband, and it's the will I have work to sustain me where in 2 years I won't be forced to have to come back to wherever they've gone from there. So let's talk about what you do for work that sustains you that could possibly give people a little bit of insight on your journey in Australia. You said 14 years. That's a long, good time.
It's a long time. When there's a couple things to that question. So one, you've got to deal with visas and really understanding the environment within that country, how open they are, what their visa structures look like. That's a really big piece of it. Also, I would also say, I'll talk about work in a second, but I'd also say it depends on where you are in your life, age, what you're looking to do. So for instance, if you're a backpacker, for Australia, and I think Canada has a very similar thing, which is you can go to Australia on a 90-day, I think a 90-day to a year or 2 year visa. And all you have to do is spend a month or two picking fruit at a farm. And so there's various things that you can do to get into a country
Oh,
depending on yeah, depending on where you're at and what you want to do.
okay.
For me, I was really fortunate to have been employed by Deloitte. So I was in DC working at Deloitte, and Deloitte had an international exchange program. It belongs to multiple member firms, and what that means is that each firm is independent.
Yes.
And so you could apply to other Deloitte member firms, and if they accepted you, they paid for all of your visas because some of the visas, depending on where you enter, can be quite expensive. And so they take care of that process. Oftentimes, so the first bit of advice I'd give is first try to do it if you can do it via an employer,
Okay.
whether that's applying online and looking at places that are receptive to international hires, because diversity is a really powerful thing. A lot of employers look for diverse sets of skills in different countries of origin
Right.
and skills. The other thing that people can do if they're really saying, no, I've been to a country or I want to move and I've got to go, the digital nomad bit is a real thing. And oftentimes, what's happening with countries now, and you can see this across Europe as well, is people will say, okay, you can come into the country on effectively a digital nomad visa.
Hmm.
You have to prove that you earn $2,000 to $3,000 per month USD. And
Okay.
that's basically signaling to that government, you're not going to be a drain on healthcare costs, taxes. You've
This,
got something to sustain
okay.
yourself.
Yeah, yeah. You know what?
It's
That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So the first thing I'd say is actually don't worry necessarily about what you do. First, look at the country you want to go to and look at their visa structures. And they're pretty clear on that on their website on what that looks like. And
Mhm.
then determine what's going to be the best pathway forward for you and where you're at.
That is absolutely wonderful advice. What about healthcare in Australia? Is it all free, or is it just like US, you got to buy a policy, pay the monthly fee and pay your co-pays and all that, or do they have universal free healthcare?
Yeah, so we have universal healthcare. We actually have both. We have universal and private healthcare, and I'll cover that in a second of why that's important. Now, behind that, and that I find this is common for most countries, to get the universal healthcare, you need to be on what's referred to as a PR. So in American terms, that's a green card. That
Oh,
means you're not a citizen, but you're a permanent resident.
got it.
So in order to get healthcare, you need to be a permanent resident or citizen. So if you're on one of the travel visas, farming visa, work visa, you'll have to pay for private healthcare. And private healthcare emulates that of what you would find in America. The other reason why Australia has universal healthcare and then they also have private healthcare. So I have a private healthcare plan as well.
Mhm.
I get tax incentivizations from the government for having that. So I pay a monthly premium and then I get money back at the end of tax season. But the reason why they have that is that public hospitals, if I ran into an issue, had to go to a public hospital, was in an emergency, I would not pay a dime. I would not be held accountable or responsible for anything that happens. My issues would be resolved. But
Okay.
sometimes people need elective surgeries where the public system is burdened with getting the necessities done. And
Okay.
so what often happens is you have private health insurance, so you can go and do those electives or things that are not necessarily life-threatening.
Wow. Okay, that's very interesting. Well, let's talk about my favorite topic, food. And if let's just say you had a couple of friends that said, "Hey, we're going to come visit you
Yeah.
and take us to some of your favorite restaurants." What would be the one or two foods that you would say, "Okay, while you're here, you have to try this."
You know what's crazy is, believe it or not, the Thai food in Australia is better than in Thailand. And the
No
reason for that is
way.
this,
How
and
is
and I
that possible?
because the produce is of higher quality.
Got it. Got
One,
it. Okay.
not, I wouldn't say it's on par with Italy. Italy's amazing, but we don't have as much additives into the soil and those types of things.
Mhm.
Big agricultural community here in Australia. But believe it or not, you've got a lot of first generation cultures here in Australia. So you've got a lot of people that, have come over from a specific place and they bring that culture with them.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of people from Thailand here. And so the Thai here is absolutely amazing. And
Wow.
actually, any of the Asian foods are just phenomenal. They really are. So you have to go to a really good Thai restaurant or Vietnamese or Chinese because you're going to get first generation food.
Okay. Okay. You know what? That was not on my bingo card for you to say because I had no idea, but I would never have thought that. That's got
And
to be
In Indian, actually, Indian is fantastic here
and
as
then
well. So,
Indian food. Okay.
um,
Wow.
the second thing, now I happen to be vegetarian, so I don't do this anymore, but there are some interesting kind of cuisines in Australia. So they do eat kangaroo, they do eat emu, which is funny that it's actually on the Australian government emblem, and it's the only country in the world that actually eats the animals that are on the emblem. But
Mm.
when I did eat meat, kangaroo is actually quite delicious. So to give it a go and give it a try, I recommend
Was it cooked? Was it baked? Was it seared? Was it barbecue?
it.
I never thought of a kangaroo being eaten. I'm shocked. I didn't know because of that being there on the flat. You know what I'm saying? So, okay.
Yeah.
So how did you have it specifically?
Well, I had it at some pretty swanky restaurants, so they knew what they were doing. Though you can buy kangaroo meat in any grocery store. I've got a dog that eats kangaroo. You can get it pretty much anywhere. They're the equivalent of squirrels or deer. There's a very huge population of kangaroos. But I think I had it probably seared. Look, it's a red meat. It's a very lean red meat.
Yeah.
I think it would probably taste similar to like a venison or something like that.
Okay, so when you said deer, I could understand that because we do have deer meat and sausage and steak and all that stuff. So I can understand that. The texture, what is the texture like? I know somebody when we were in Louisiana, they said, "Hey, let's try some alligator etouffee or something like that." And I was like, "Okay, I'll try it." And it was a bit tough, and so I was like, I didn't like the texture of it. What's the texture to you of kangaroo meat?
Yeah, again, really weird as a vegetarian saying this, but from memory, Like a steak. It's a proper red meat, not overly gamey. And actually, I remember enjoying it. I thought it was a bit delicious. So if that's your forte, if you're into that, I recommend giving it a go.
Stopped eating meat 7 years ago, so it's like I'm just curious though. I just I would have never thought. And what was the other animal you said?
Emu. Now, I've never eaten emu. I have no idea what it's like. I do know it's a bird. I think it has more characteristics of red meat, but they do eat this as well.
Okay. That's interesting. See, I learn something new every single day of my life, and that I did not know. That's awesome. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us first about Australia that we would need to know if we were going to visit there from your experience?
Yeah, the first thing is just like anything, take in the culture. It is, I think, oftentimes Americans, and I had this when I went as well, which is, oh, they speak English, they're like us. They're not like us. Actually, it's very culturally different. In fact, there's probably more linkages to Europe than there is to America.
Really? Oh,
So one, really soak in the beach lifestyle, the very laid back lifestyle. If you get to stay here longer, I think the work-life balance that you achieve in Australia, I think Australians have that figured out
I like that.
really, really well. But like anything, just absorb the culture. Try not to push too many of the Americanisms on, and try not to compare it to America because it's not America.
Exactly. You know what? That right there, what you just said is so super important because I remember when I was in Costa Rica and they were talking about the fact that they do not have a military or an army and they do not believe in it. And they were saying, and it's even frowned upon when visitors come and they have on their military fatigue and things like that. And I was like,
Mm.
that's something that people need to know. I don't wear any of the military fatigue, but I'm just thinking, if I was, visiting with friends or something and they had a shirt or, how you have the t-shirt and the pants and different things like that. And I'm like, that's really important to know because how would you know if you've never been there before and you're just visiting? It's good to get yourself into the community and meet people so that you know the rules of places that you go to. Is there one, before I let you go, is there one rule other than that one? Because I love that one, that an American specifically should know before they go to Australia.
Oh, look, there's probably one personal pet peeve I'll give you, which is stay out of the, God, what do you want to call them? Souvenir shops. So try not to get one of those really big hats or any of the stuff that's souvenir and walk around with it. That personally is probably one of my biggest pet peeves
You
of
sound
Americans that
you
go to
sound
Australia.
like a New Yorker. I remember I used to go to New York all the time and they would always frown upon Americans that would come over or other states. I love New York t-shirts. You would get the stinkiest looks you have ever seen. Like, oh my gosh, you're such a tourist. And they would look at you. I did it once and I never did it again because I got the most horrible looks like, that's stupid. It's like, okay, I'm just gonna take these back to the kids' home. I will never wear this in Times Square again. But I didn't know that real New York people, I didn't know that they frowned upon that. But we find it so funny now that, we experienced that. It was funny to us at the time. It's even more funny now, all these years later. That's a good idea because people love to raid the souvenir shop and then wear their stuff. I was in Mexico a few months ago and there was a guy who bought the big sombrero, but it was about the size of a car. You couldn't even see his head or his face. The sombrero was so big, and he was downtown in Cancun just having a good time. And I'm thinking to myself, you're taking up the whole entire sidewalk and half the street with this hat, but he was partying and having a good time. And I was like, you know what? Go ahead and get your memories. But even
Well,
I
hey,
thought it was funny.
at the end of the day, you be you. So if you want to do that, you go do it. But it will be very clear that you are not from there. They will probably peg you as American, and if that's cool with you, you go for it.
You
Just be
want to be
wary.
incognito. All right. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us personally about you or any work that you're doing? If you have anything online, I am looking forward to, like you said, the book that you're writing. I think that is a very important journey that you're going on with writing that book. So please, when you get the book finished, to let us know so I can have you on here to talk about your book because I do interview authors as well. But then that way we can go through and talk about your book and explore, what you have as a finished product. So keep me in mind for that as well. But is there anything else that you would like to share? Do you offer any coaching or mentoring or anything that you'd like to share with the public?
Yeah, look, I don't offer any coaching or mentoring now, but I do write, and I'm a public speaker on the topic of critical thinking. It's a really a passion project for me.
Okay.
Trying to get people to realize that critical thinking is actually more about health and wellness and giving you self-agency rather than an academic exercise.
Mhm.
And so subsequently, I do have a website. It's daniellekpearson.com. You can Google it. It should come up if my SEO is working effectively. And then on LinkedIn, I tend to produce an article or an infographic once a week
Mhm.
on specific topics. So it can be everything from things like, hey, are conspiracy theories a form of critical thinking? Or what is critical thinking? Or, the linkage between diet and how we process our thoughts. So I try to find things that I think are interesting to put out to the public to really break myths and misnomers.
That is so important. Thank you, Danielle, for being my guest today. I have enjoyed you so much, and I'm so excited, and I'm super, super proud on your book that you're writing. I can't wait to be able to see it and share it and tell everybody I know and read it. I will read your book, and I will even do a review on it if you'd like me to. I am just that type of nerd.
I can see from your bookshelf. Yeah.
But thank you for being my guest today, and I appreciate it. And we're going to leave it there, but make sure you give me all the links and everything that I can put in the description bar for everybody to reach out to you and get your information and look forward to that book as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Don. Thank you.
You are so welcome. Thank you, Danielle. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks, Don.
Bye bye.
Bye.